Hi there. My name's Tommy Yionoulis, and I am the host of the brand new podcast, Empire Builders, Scaling Success One Location at a Time. This is a podcast dedicated to talking to the founders and the current leadership of those large multi-location brands that you see every single day where you eat and shop at. And we want to find out from these guys, why this business, right? Why of all the things you could do in the world, you chose to do this? We're going to learn what their challenges were at the beginning, what almost broke them. We're going to learn what they're facing today. And as always, we're going to end the show with a wonderful war story. That's one of those stories where you go, I can't believe we got through this. It was insanity, and hopefully they always end with a nice little laugh. So I can't tell you how excited I am to bring you these interviews with these amazing guests and just stoke that entrepreneurial flame that we all have to learn what it took to kind of get where they are today and how they got successful. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to sharing these wonderful interviews with you. Hey there, everyone. It's Tommy. I'm back with another episode of Empire Builders. Please welcome to the show, Taylor Byington.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Taylor, did I say your name correctly?
You know what? It was a good attempt. It's Byington.
Byington.
It's a weird one, though. So I have an easy first name and a complicated last name. So it's all good.
Yeah, same with me. Like, this is a hard one. But usually I check before we start. But, I'm tired. I'm not going to lie to you.
Hey, I'm good.
Okay, man. Welcome to the show. We have a great episode, so let's just get right into the questions. Tell us about your current company and tell us your role in that company.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. What we're building right now, it's the name of the company is called Coverpanda. And Coverpanda is building an all-in-one operating system for the franchise space. So it's really kind of like the full tech stack for franchisors as they're getting their brand off the ground.
So it's for the franchisor.
Yeah, it's kind of a two-sided offering where we handle a lot of like the financial services, so bookkeeping and payroll and insurance for the franchisees, but we're kind of plugging it into the franchisor's dashboard. We're allowing them to kind of introduce this as almost like a vendor to these franchisees and kind of just take that whole onboarding out of that setup process.
So the idea is, I am Tommy Subs, right? You're going to come to me and you're like, hey, dude, you're trying to grow Tommy Subs. I can provide you with like a financial and kind of like a franchisee sales processes, right? That you can use, and then you can use that to go and manage your business. But at the same time, you can pass it on to your franchisees to manage their business. But then you also get the obvious, you get some of those insights into their business where you want it, right?
Exactly. So really kind of where it stems from is my experience as a franchisee initially. Growing, we wanted to be the best franchise portfolio for any of these brands we were working with. And we quickly started to realize that we needed to see what best practices were in order to become that best like storefront, that best franchisee. And we quickly realized the issue wasn't that the franchisors were unwilling to help us see those best practices and become better. They shouldn't have the data to be able to provide. And so we kind of worked backwards by offering, standardized financial services to the franchisees that ultimately the franchisors can pull in those financial analytics to then give the coaching that they need to kind of help standardize the companies.
Do they, is it so it's not anonymized, right? Like they would know, hey, Tommy's having some issues in his stores. So
exactly.
And yes. It's mostly focused around the financial sector, like the financials of the business.
Initially it was, yes. We recently just launched our latest product update where it's now including performance and operational reports. So you're able to go see how are your employees doing, are your managers fully trained? What's your payroll? Like what's your hourly and, this region of the United States versus, what maybe West Coast versus East Coast. And the hope there is to really just power franchisors with a lot of the data that they need to get the ongoing value while they're trying to grow a brand. They can't do they can do anything, but they can't do everything. And so we're trying to be that second set of hands that curates that data to ultimately help both sides of the franchise scale.
Well, yeah, because the reality is the franchises, it's a symbiotic relationship, right? And I worked at Quiznos back in like 2008, 2009, right when they crested 5,000 locations, were on their way down. And what a lot of people don't understand about this relationship is that the franchisor, this also depends on their FDD, but the way most FDDs are written, most modern FDDs are written, they're trying to be kind of more hands off, because of the National Labor Relations Board BS that they're messing around with for the last decade. But essentially, they don't have a ton of levers to pull for you. So if you are a franchisee and you're out there in the world and you're operating and, bad luck, road construction, some poor decisions, whatever it is, if the brand starts to get upside down, right, where all of a sudden, like the store operators, like their AUVs, average unit volume, their sales are going down. The only real lever that corporate has to pull is couponing, menu innovation, if you're talking restaurants, or product innovation. And that's it. And marketing, like mass marketing. That's it. They can do no more than that. They they're not allowed to come into your business and start telling you like they can tell you what to do, but it's up to you to do it. And if that relationship gets too far down, which is what happened at Quiznos, where there's just this massive amount of distrust and anger and broken dreams in the franchise community, the franchisor can't even do those few things well because they can't be assured that if they run a coupon, everyone's going to accept it. Or if they come up with some new marketing campaign around some new food item or menu item or whatever, that people are going to actually sell it or implement it correctly, right? So it's imperative that the franchisor has data to do these things before they go over the tipping point. Because once they go over the tipping point, it is almost impossible to get yourself back up, right? Like, and I'll just give you a quick side note. Like, one of the first interviews I did on this podcast was a multi-unit Subway operator. And he was saying how that last set of, marketing with those, like the $3 cookie and all that kind of stuff, was one of the most successful things that they had and actually drove AUVs for the first time in a long time. That actually drove AUVs up. But you knew it was impossible to sustain. You can't have Tom Brady doing 50 ads a year. You know what I mean? Like that's not free, right? You know what I mean? Like
totally.
It's nuts.
Yeah, and that's a lot what we were seeing, honestly, is that, franchisors, this is kind of my hot take, is franchisors, the way they became a franchisor is they were initially they were the operator, right? So they came up with the idea, they came up with the products, the branding, the vision that they're selling to these franchisees that come on board. But pretty quickly, they have franchisees that have more experience operating one of their locations or brands than they'll have for the rest of the life cycle for the company. And so really what you want as a franchisee is you want your franchisor to be like kind of a data-driven company, even if it doesn't start out that way. So like, for an example, all my stores, it's Crumbl Cookies. So I have 9 Crumbls across 3 time zones. We always laugh that I'm in Mountain Standard Time.
Yeah.
But I have stores Pacific Standard, Central Standard, and Eastern Standard. So we cover all 4 time zones. Sure. Not a great decision to make, but we learned the hard way. But in growing, what I realized pretty quickly is I don't actually want the CEO and Sawyer and Jason, the kind of 2 co-founders. I don't want them kind of working backwards and coming back into the business and saying, all right, we're going to derail what the brand is, what our product innovation is. We need to go figure out how to help Taylor standardize what his payroll is, or how to get his bottom line, to increase his bottom line margins. So really what you want is you want them to have kind of a sole focus on furthering the product, furthering the brand, and they have a team that can kind of tap into data to give you the coaching that you need, but you're not taking your eye off the ball and derailing the entire company. Well,
and it's funny. I had a previous podcast, and one of my best buddies from grad school was a restaurant. His dad's like a massive restaurant food innovator. Like he does the frozen lines for PF Chang's, huge things, whatever. And he was working at Heinz and he was working at Wendy's and in the supply chain, helping them develop products. And what's amazing is that and then he had a consulting business where he was helping people, do this methodically, right? And he was like, it's amazing how many of these giant multi-million-dollar food campaigns are just like a bunch of guys sitting around a table going, what about a chicken tender sandwich? Yeah, chicken tender sandwich. We should do that. Like there's so little science or data behind it. And the restaurant industry, as you know, is not a data-driven industry. It's not like everyone wants to look at sales, and sales are great, right? Sales are important. PMix is important. But like, there's so much more to like coming out with a new cookie or a new promotion or a different size cookie for a different occasion, which is the high school kid coming home from school that doesn't have $5 for a cookie, but maybe has $2 for a cookie.
Yes.
You know? And like all those things go into how you package it, and is it going to be a drive-through or whatever, right? Like, and that was kind of his big take on the world. Is like, you'd be amazed at how many giant decisions and like massive companies are just people going, yeah, romaine lettuce is good. We can make a salad. You're just like, what are you talking about?
Well, I would second that. I think our big bet is what we're seeing is like a trend in this space is, so it's kind of two polarizing data points where number one, franchising demand and the interest of outsiders wanting to get started in franchising has never had as much of an upward trend year over year, going from like 2022 through 2024 and into 2025. But at the same time, existing franchisees have never had consistent year over year reported concerns of profitability and like the future and how that looks. And so it kind of tells me two things that we are betting on. There's going to be more players getting into this space wanting to open franchises, or franchisors wanting to, franchise a concept. And at the same time, that means that there's going to be less quality in terms of the franchisor or the team that's going to be kind of at the helm.
Absolutely.
And our bet is we're saying there's going to be those golden nuggets. We want to power them with the infrastructure to be able to go scale and stand out away from, kind of the duds.
Yeah. And this is what frustrates me. So I don't know if you know what we do, but we have an operations management platform, and we're in tons of like 8,000 franchisees.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So we have like franchisees and franchisors too. Like they build out the daily routine. They start out by building out the daily routines for the business. So then every location has a series of scheduled processes and checklists and forms that they fill out all day long on a calendar, essentially. And then all that data flows up to corporate, right? And then at the same time, and so that's where they start. They start with all the red book processes, opening checklists, are you food safe, cleaning, reset between lunch and dinner, all that kind of stuff, closing checklists, like like what you would have gotten in a red book 30 years ago. But then what we found is that's about 10% of the checklists they actually use. The 90% of the checklists that they're using are ones that they've built to manage the business. So, especially when you own a lot of stores, because ultimately, by the way, don't ever buy into a franchise that doesn't own any of their own stores, because they will consistently make stupid decisions and they'll have no way to test it. You'll be the guinea pig that they test on, and it'll be this big fire drill with a bunch of kind of herd cats, and then it won't work, right? I have a fun story about that in a second. But anyway, so then they start building out all these processes to manage the business. So like, did you get your schedule posted? Like if you're in Seattle and you don't post it on the 15th, you're going to get fined. If you change your schedule, why did you change it? Because you're going to get fined, or you have to pay extra hours, right? We did COVID screenings during COVID and, all these different things. And it's funny because I've been selling the sort of a similar non-competing product to yours, which is operations data, right? What I'm saying is, like, you have to have this data about how you're operating your business so that you can tie that to the financial data that you're collecting. Because you can't, if you just look at sales numbers and you see a chart and it's going like, here's my camera, it's going like this, you don't know why that is. Like, because sales naturally in the restaurant, you have to look at them with a trend line. You can't just look at them week by week, because you could have a busload of none show up Sunday afternoon and you're week positive, even though it was scaling negative, right? You need to see that trend line going across that tells you whether you're growing or subtracting. And it's just like, I've been pushing this data narrative to these guys for years, but what I have learned, and I'd be curious to see if you've learned something similar, is that restaurant companies, especially franchisors, like you mentioned the reason why you became a franchisor. One of the reasons why you become a franchisor is so you don't actually have to operate the restaurants. That's another whole reason behind it, because operating restaurants is hard work, right? It's repetitive. It requires a specific kind of person who's a great people manager who can stay focused on metrics and keep people motivated, right? And it's a lot of work to run restaurants. That's why you see all these companies like Qdoba used to own half their restaurants. Now they own maybe a third of their restaurants, and they're trying to go down to like 10% of their restaurants, right? They're trying to franchise them out because operating restaurants is much harder. Now you've got, labor issues and all the stuff that goes along with it. So and I think that shift of, hey, we're a bunch of franchisors. By the way, I'm monopolizing your podcast and I apologize.
Oh, no, it's great.
In a second. But what they don't want to run restaurants, right? They don't want to run them. They just want to get like a little bit of a percentage of the top and like do the easy stuff, the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday stuff. And they want to be there Christmas Day or whatever. But they don't appreciate. They stopped appreciating that the best way to grow your business is to be great at operating within your four walls, right? And they've moved to this method of quick fixes, BOGOs, special offers, all these things that's trying to boost the bottom line, but they can only do it temporarily because they don't have the marketing dollars to do it consistently, right? So it's a very frustrating thing for me as somebody who's been in the restaurant industry since I was 14 years old,
Yeah, no, I think what you said is very fair. I think it kind of follows the same trend line. Honestly, I don't see any difference between the failure rate of like startups, so they say, 1 to 5% of startups make it. It's kind of the same thing with franchising, where I don't think that either concept is really exempt from, trend lines. And you're talking about the overlap between operational and financial data. I couldn't agree more. So running our stores, it's interesting because we have 9 stores and it's no longer my day-to-day, but all our products are all built on top of my stores first, right? And so we are our own guinea pigs, making sure that our team, so now we have somebody that is overseeing all of our 9 stores. And again, they're in 3 different time zones, right? And so it is a different infrastructure. You don't just have one leadership team, you have one almost like CEO executive position that's then overseeing kind of 3 departments, if you will, but on 3 sides of the country. And so it's been tricky, but what we've had to do is you really do have to blend the operational data and the financial data because they do tell a story. And a great example of this that we just ran into was we had a store in a suburb of Nashville that was it was on a continued trend line down and we couldn't figure out why. Well, we found out why pretty quickly when we blended the operational data with the financial data and seeing that we had the wrong person in as manager. And unfortunately, without getting into the weeds, there was theft, there was a lot of just kind of oversight that really that's why you need the 2 data points to kind of come together and tell you the true story. And the numbers really won't lie. They will tell you that there's a canary in the coal mine.
Well, and absolutely. And the problem is that people like sales data because it comes out of the register and it's really easy to pull and you don't have to manage anything to get it, right? As long as people are using the register. But that register sales number doesn't say that, and I think you guys make your dough from scratch, right? You don't use frozen cookie pucks, is that correct?
That's correct.
Because I know I've seen a Hobart in the one by my house. So that's why I guessed that. But like there's another cookie store in the same like general shopping center, which is amazing to me that they would allow 2 to be in the same one. They use frozen cookie pucks, right? So but like the point is like let's go to the frozen cookie puck one, right? So let's say you're the frozen cookie puck store, not your store, not Crumbl Cookie, the other store. Those guys, they don't like proof the dough, right? They don't pull the cookie pucks out the night before and stick them in the walk-in on trays. So then the cookie baking takes longer, right? So then let's just say the guy who goes in the next morning is like, oh man, no one proofed all the cookies and got all the trays laid out and got all the cookies ready to bake. So now that guy's scrambling. 11 o'clock opens up. It just happens to be a nursery school full of kids shows up. There's no cookies cooked, right? Because like they weren't done operationally correct. Like they didn't follow the right procedure. So they're like, yeah, can you come back in 30 minutes and all the cookies will be done? Well, as you know, in the cookie business, those guys aren't coming back. They're going to Baskin Robbins or some other place.
Yeah.
They're not coming back over there. And you just lost, whatever, $150 worth of sales. And that's how operations affect sales. If you were making burgers, you had 1/4 pound burger patties, so the example I use, and you're supposed to pull them at night and proof them. So by the next morning they're thawed, and they cook 2 minutes thawed or 2 minutes per side thawed, but they're frozen. So they're cooking 5 minutes. Then all of a sudden there's a cascading effect. If you're a burger restaurant, where now your drive-through line's longer, which means people are seeing that and going, I don't have time. They're driving by, right? The people that are in your line are pissed off because they're like, this usually only takes 3 minutes and now it's taking 8 minutes or whatever, right? And like, those are we are an operations business, and operations directly affects sales and customer satisfaction and marketing. So like, it's crazy to me that people aren't taking more time to understand their operations, right? It's nuts.
I totally agree.
So, well, we'll have a good conversation after the show where we can talk more. But let's move on. So, all right. So I want to talk about Crumbl Cookie for a second, because Crumbl Cookie was in the news, right? It exploded. I mean, I don't know when we first found out about it, but we have one literally within walking distance of our house. And, we were getting them a ton during COVID, and after like 2021, 22, we were getting them a ton. Then I think you guys might have had some bad real estate deals somewhere in your portfolio where people weren't able to keep up. Like, so what happened with that you guys got in the news for that?
Yeah. So the whole storyline here is, I'll kind of say it holistically. And then if you were interested to hear from like my experience, because I got in kind of through the whole run up through COVID. And so kind of just like kind of high level bird's eye view, what happened was Crumbl kind of hit this TikTok viral trend through COVID, where it took off like a rocket ship, and it was just up and to the right. You really couldn't miss. And there was even like, I couldn't tell you who told me to do this, but as we were trying to, screen locations, I was getting feedback from other franchisees saying, hey, pick a lease, get open, and let it print. And like, let it print the money. And I think some people might have done that, and so that's kind of the issue there. Now, where it kind of came back, and there's this, sharp bell curve initially, was number one, it's irrational to come into a concept and that's having every month over month trend is, you're beating your last best record month. You can't do that. It's not sustainable, obviously.
Of course.
But once it starts coming back down, a lot of the early franchisees were kind of like side hustle owners. So they weren't in the stores. They didn't have to roll their sleeves up. They didn't have to go experience the operations. So then when things start coming back down and they already have a full-time job, they don't have the bandwidth to come into their stores and be like, problem solving. Like, what can I do to, find margin in this business now? And so people started losing their shorts that were really just running it kind of haphazardly from the beginning. And there was a day of reckoning, and so now there was kind of a floor where we definitely saw the highs, we saw the lows.
Sure.
And now, at least our experience in our stores, we've seen this, slower trajectory back up. And yeah, they've been great. They've been doing great for us so far.
And honestly, and I don't know if you did this or not, but when it hit the basement, right, and you had a bunch of doctors who owned a Crumbl Cookie and they were looking to get out, that's the best time to get in because like at Quiznos, the business model was the first franchisee would lose their ass most of the time because the build out was so expensive. So they'd have a 450, and those Crumbl Cookies are beautiful, by the way. So I'm sure the build out's a couple $100,000 at least on one of those things. Right. So then
it's like
you have
$500,000 or $600,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a lot of money. So then you have to make money when you have that nut on top of your lease, on top of your marketing, on top of your labor and, your variable costs. So, that's really tough. And so a lot of times what would happen was the first franchisee would go out of business. The second franchisee would come and get it at half price, right? $200K-ish. They'd go out of business. And the third guy would come in and get it for $50,000 and he could finally make money. And so they churn through so many people. And, and that didn't happen to everybody. Obviously, if you got a great location, you probably did good from day one. You may have been able to keep it. But if you had a medium location, right, that's where that shows up. And if you have a bad location, you're toast. You won't even.
Yeah.
Whatever. So, because what's funny about all of this, right, is it always goes back to the fundamentals of business. And I always say this because this show is a show that's directed at franchisors and franchisees, is that you have to remember when you're a franchise, because so my first job at Quiznos, just so you know, I ran the franchise assistance program. So I was there to help franchisees that were failing in 2008 during the financial downturn and at the top of the curve. So for 10 months, that's all I did was listen to people tell me how their business was failing. But there was a trend that I saw of all those people whose business were failing, which was they stopped taking responsibility for their business and they just started blaming the franchisor. Now, Quiznos was not a great partner, so they had a lot of beef with the franchisor. But at the end of the day, it's your name on that SMB loan. It's your name on that lease. It's your credit that's about to be destroyed. So, when your franchisor is not living up to your dreams, you've got to this isn't one of those situations where you can go, nah, I'm not doing that. It's still, you're the one who's on the risk, right? So you've got to buck up. This is a perfect example of working through the system. So you've got to do what you have to do to save your business, to grow your business, whatever it takes. And then you've got to get on the franchise advisory board and start hammering corporate and become a giant pain in the butt at corporate so that they know that you're demanding that they change their rules and regulations or give you some outs on things that don't make sense for your business, right? So I say this all the time. It's your business. You're the franchisor. You've got to make it work no matter what's happening at corporate, right?
No, I totally agree. And I think that just to kind of further that, we've got a funny story we can come back to in a minute, just that very experience I had myself. But something that I tell people when they ask me about getting into franchising is you're betting on a horse here. So it's a lot like if you're coming to join like a startup or an early stage company, you're looking at who's at the helm and do they have the track record and kind of the resume to justify you putting all your eggs in this basket, because you're making a decision on the front end that you don't know what the repercussions are in 5 years. So you're kind of making a business decision before you ever make your first dollar. Yeah. And so it's ironically the most overlooked stage of getting into franchising, yet it's probably the most significant.
That and this also goes back to what your new platform is that you're selling, right? Which is you've got to have the data, man. Like this isn't like I feel like I should do this or I feel like I should do that type of thing. You've got to have hard, cold data, which you can get a lot of good data out of your register for sure. But you also need the data best practices. And that's what I like what you're doing. You're crowdsourcing the best practices so that they can compare what they're doing to what other people are doing, right? So then you can find that other market in the country that mimics, the market you're in demographically. Also, you're not just looking at the demographics, obviously, you're also looking at what's the quality of the franchisees in these other stores. Because you could say, well, this guy, because you're always going to get those freakazoid stores that are like in an airport or in a bus station or a subway where they just constantly print money because they get 100 million people walk by it every day. But, so you have to understand that part of it too. How good is the operator? All that stuff. That stuff's all super important to understand what the decisions you're going to make. Because the other thing too is you don't get points for inventing the wheel. The reason you bought a franchise was so you didn't have to invent the wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to draft the smart people who already solved this problem so you can do what they did. And you don't have to think
Absolutely.
It through. You just do it, right? It's crazy.
No, I totally agree. And I think that's the overlooked, I think detail that I think everybody that's in franchising, the franchisor and the franchisee, that first franchisee that's signing on for their first location has this like inkling of a dream to eventually have 10 stores or 100 stores. And the franchisor, what do you think they want to do? Work with 100 franchisees or 10? They want 10 that are really solid. And so it's ironic because it's really investing in that, that relationship and helping both sides scale ultimately grows both sides of the company.
Yeah.
And so.
And I would say another thing too, if you're thinking about getting into franchising, and I know I've said it before on the show, but make sure that the incentives are aligned.
Yeah.
Like one of the biggest problems at Quiznos was towards the end is that they made more money from their food distributorship. And by the way, this is not now. This is 5, 10, 15 years ago. They made more money off their food distributorship than they made on royalties from the stores. So they had a vested interest. Their incentive was, So like if they were going to do prime rib, they would just drop ship a case of prime rib to every store in the country, whether they needed prime rib or not. So like their incentives weren't aligned. So the franchisee was constantly getting screwed by Quiznos corporate because their incentives weren't aligned. You need to be with a franchisor that when you win, they win. But when you lose, they lose too, right? And that they have a vested interest in making sure you win so they win. So that's what you have to try to suss out when you're talking to these franchise sales guys, because these franchise sales guys, they get commissioned on selling franchises. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. It's the fastest car ever, man. It's sexy. You look beautiful in that convertible. You don't look stupid or creepy. You know, like they're going to tell you what you need to know. So, or what you need to hear to buy.
Very well said.
Yes. So you can see that this is a very structured podcast. So that was question number one. Question number two is, okay, well, so why Crumbl Cookie? I guess, well, why software? We'll talk about the software company. So you already kind of explained that in question one. We'll go to question three now. What were some of your early challenges with this software company?
Yeah, so initially it was that it was more of a service, you know? So like I mentioned initially, we literally built this concept to just manage my stores. And we quickly realized that I was not the only Crumbl franchisee that had these problems. So we started offering these same services to other, multi-unit franchisees. Then that spun out to, grow within the system with Crumbl. And then it turned into kind of multi-brand franchisees. And so we naturally just started to see this trend that more and more concepts were interested. Now, where we got kind of the initial challenges that we ran into is kind of the chicken and the egg. So do you solve for the franchisee first, or do you solve for the franchisor first? Like which side of that do you think that you're going after? And we looked at some of these tools, like a lot of like the franchise management systems in the game. And a lot of the feedback we were getting was there's a pretty steep, people are willing to pay and kind of throw money at a problem, but getting adoption for that software through your entire system, franchisees, and even your internal corporate team, is really hard to turn that wagon around once it's already going in a direction. Yeah. So people are throwing money at a product and there's no like solution on how to get people to adopt it. And so what we decided to do, the challenge that we recognize is you can't go into Crumbl. Crumbl's honestly, their software and tech stack is great, but I'm using them as an example. It's like once a concept gets to scale, it's really hard to go in and make an impactful difference if they didn't set out to solve this problem from kind of inception. And so our pivot that we've made is really solving that issue at very inception with early emerging concepts. So usually it's about 100 locations opened or less, and around 2 to 250 is total sold, and kind of catching them at that sweet spot where they've started to scale, but they're not at scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's totally makes sense. The problem is too, right? And this is just such a frustrating thing with dealing with franchisors and franchisees, is that a lot of franchisors, unless you're selling them something that's going to help them grow sales, which is the only way they get paid, they are more than likely not going to purchase it and mandate it for everybody unless it fits the culture of their business. So like going into like some existing concept, right? They got a couple hundred stores, whatever it is. And, they've never done any of this kind of stuff before. Like the franchisor, they're always operating on this tight budget, especially if their stores aren't doing well, right? Or they're just okay. And like, so they don't have this cash. And then because of that National Labor Relations Board mess, they won't mandate something down to everybody. And also, depending on the relationship they have with their franchisees, they won't mandate it down either, because they don't want 100 phone calls. They don't want to get yelled at by every phone. You're going to make me buy this? Blah, 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 Like we were dealing with a brand. I'm not going to mention them, but like they have like a couple big players, like a couple, like maybe one 100 unit guy, maybe one 300 unit guy, and then everybody else is onesie twosies, right? Like maybe 10, 15, the most. And these guys are like, that these people still work their restaurants. So they're like, I'm there. I don't need that. Like they don't need anything, right? That I've been running this thing for 30 years. Yet they're losing money every year because they're not adapting. They're not like moving the business into the future, right? But so it's so tough to get the franchisor to actually do anything other than just say, oh yeah, you guys can use this. That's great. But then they won't give you a list of people to call. You can't find, as you know, it's impossible to find the yous of the world. If I was trying to find you, the owner of your 9 Crumbl Cookies, I can never find you because it's probably like Taylor Corp Incorporated, and you're not on LinkedIn as a friend. You know what I mean? Like you're hiding. You're hiding purposely to avoid sales costs, which I totally get. But now that you're on the tech side, you're probably like, you son of a, like I need to get in front of the Taylors of the world, right? Because they're so hard to find. Yeah, this is a hard business to sell into because of that.
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about franchising, what's such a phenomenon to me is it kind of is like the vernacular is almost as if it's, like you're in an industry. And it's like, no, franchising is a business model that spans across every industry. And so that makes it more complex because you're almost getting it convoluted between industry and business model. Yep. And, if you don't really distinguish the two, you don't know which one are you selling? Which are you selling into a vertical or are you selling into a model?
Yeah. It's so tough. But then again, I don't want to say like I'm down on franchising. I have franchisees that own 250 Pizza Huts and Taco Bells that have literally almost a $300 million a year business, and they own strip centers, and I mean, there's really a real estate business for them at this point. You know what I mean? But I have franchisees that make. If you I was talking to a franchise salesman for Potbelly at the Colorado restaurant show in April or March, whenever, and he was like, if you're trying to go from you're trying to become a millionaire, franchising, the normal person who's not like a super rich guy, if you want to go from a normal person to being a multimillionaire, franchising is probably your easiest and fastest way to make that happen.
Absolutely. No, I just had my CPA just made a comment to my wife and I. We were just getting ready for closing out the year, tax season, kind of understanding what our tax burden is. And my wife made a comment. She's more into real estate than I am, and she just asked me, if we were to buy this real estate investment, how would that offset our taxable income? Where would we be at? And our CPA just kind of cut us off and was like, "You guys are already franchised. You found the vehicle. Why don't you just put your foot on the gas a little bit, and why are you overcomplicating it, And so I couldn't agree more with what you just said.
Well, yeah, I have a buddy who's a CFO, and he was a investment banker for years and a CFO, 2 major companies, and little ownership and everything. Done real well for himself, but he's a deal guy, so he can't sit still and just he can't just let his money grow and enjoy his life. He's constantly looking what can I do here? What can I do there? It's the thrill of the hunt. And I see that with so many of my friends too. And I'm like you have a thing that you make a lot of money at, just make more money at that, It's nuts.
The ADHD, that must be what it is for me.
Totally. Yeah, I know. All right. So getting started, was you sort of had to pivot because you weren't sure, you were trying. Yeah, it's a very hard market to pick apart where you want to go with these guys and how you get them to kind of jump on board, right? So with the cookie stores, what was the initial issues that you faced?
Oh, that's a long list. How much time do you have? It's so we opened 9 stores in 18 months, but we opened our first 7 in 12 months, and it was 2 guys that did not come from the bakery world or the franchise world. In fact, the story of this is, so my business partner, he's actually a partner of mine with Coverpanda as well. He and I met in college. He was a great friend of mine, and we kind of just knew we wanted to work with each other. Decided that we were going to cold call, because we kind of came from an insurance background. Cold called these insurance agencies around our university to see if we could buy one before we graduated. Well, the person was selling to go open the first couple of Crumbl franchises. And so we started helping him get these stores open. I'm literally rolling, these stores are in Utah. I'm rolling his mixers and his ovens into his stores, trying to just get the insurance agency deal to close and kind of getting introduced to Crumbl as a byproduct. And anyway, through that whole experience, my partner and I, we realized there's something to this franchise thing. We should take a stab at this. And anyways, one thing led to another. We quickly we had reserved 14 territories, and we start the process of franchising. There's this euphoria. You sign the FDD, you pay your franchise fees. Now what? And you quickly realize, you're like, oh, there is a lot of hoops to jump through to get from where you're at today and to a grand opening day. And Crumbl initially, they had this rule where you're supposed to have, your first store in 6 months, and then your second in 3 months, your third in 3 months. That's, 3 in a year.
Well, this is all smart. That seems like an accelerated timeline, but that's very smart. Because if you get three, then if one goes bad, you have 2 more to like kind of keep it going, right?
Well, what people don't think about is if it's an emerging franchise, it's really hard to get financing on that. Really hard, especially to get 3 loans to finance on that all in the same year, because you're front loading all of your expenses on store number 1. So then you go apply for a loan on store number 2, and they're looking at your financials from store number 1 as like, can this actually, keep the second one afloat? And so it's a weird, balancing act. We definitely didn't get those stores open in that year timeline because of COVID, and all of the, all of our equipment was stuck in the canals. So we were on a shrunk down timeline. Well, timelines were an issue, but what became the problem is we were also bleeding cash through the build outs, and our general contractors, we picked the cheap, the affordable, and they ended up giving us this runaround forever. We thought we were making progress, managing it from afar. He ends up walking off our job with $400,000 and walks away with it. And pretty much we ended up filing a class action lawsuit. He files for bankruptcy, and we get $6,500 back through a bail bond, essentially, that he had, to make do. But that was kind of our reality. So my business partner and I, we ended up moving out to San Diego, because that's where this all took place initially. And we lived on our owner-operator's couch. And we were the subcontractors. We were kind of the hands that helped our new general contractor build the stores, because we didn't have another option. And so it was kind of through COVID. We had, we both had young kids, and we just kind of said, all right, we're gonna have to relocate for, the however long we have to be here to get this thing done. And that was probably the first major challenge was, kind of going back to what you're saying about, you have to figure out how to get through this. Corporate can't just give me that money back, and they can't come out and build my startup. No, then so it was kind of my problem to fix. And I think that was actually in a weird way a huge blessing, because it forced us, even though we started franchising with more of like a hands-off approach, we actually ended up realizing like you don't succeed with hands-off. Like you can't, especially if you're new. You have to have your hands on the business, and you have to understand what those levers are that you can actually pull on, because you really can't hire somebody that will take you serious, not feed you stories every time there's a concern in those reports. And so in a weird roundabout way, like the biggest blessing we had in this whole venture was the fact that we lost $400,000 on the front end. Well,
and I mean, God bless that you kept it going for sure, but like, man, that's brutal. I would get, and the reality is too, like, you can't also build you have to be on site when you're building shit.
Yeah. Yes.
Like you excuse my French there, but you have to be there. You cannot build something remotely unless you've got an other guy who's in charge of making sure that the guy you paid is doing his job, right? Like you could do it with a foreman, and you're like, look, here's your budget, get it done under budget and on time, and you get to keep the bonus of whatever you're able to pull that in under, but get it approved and open, then maybe you could do it. But if you just hire a contractor, that doesn't have to show up. I worked at a different job prior to the tech world, and we had the same problem where we had a guy who didn't have enough contractors, and he was moving from job site to job site. And like, we would go over there and go, where are the contractors? And he would pull them from the other site to our site. Then they would call, like, where are the contractors? And, it was horrible. So those contractors, man, they're dirtbags. And that's the thing too. Like he got away with a crime because he got 390, whatever.
Exactly.
$100. And, you got 6,500, right? And so, he blew that on stuff. So.
Yeah. No, it's kind of that theme, I think, in everything where, you commonly hear people say, don't look for passive income. And it's because passive income, it might become passive one day, but don't plan on it. It definitely doesn't work that way, or it shouldn't.
No, I mean, occasionally you hear some crazy person who won a lottery ticket and found some glitch in the matrix where they're making a fortune without doing anything, but that's not everybody,
Yeah, right.
What's it called? So then today, you said you pivoted. So the next question would generally be like, we kind of already answered all the questions because you talked about the software company. Now you've pivoted. That's kind of what was your current challenge. What's your current challenge with the cookie companies?
It's kind of I think it's the same problem a lot of franchisees will run into as you get really as with any kind of company, if you start this, this venture, there's not like a plateau. You don't really have the luxury to just stop.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like you have a team of solid talent. So like we have our Crumbl, our kind of org chart there. It is dialed in. We have really, really sharp players, but they're all sharp because they're all hungry and they want to keep growing with our portfolio. And so you're kind of compelled, you're forced to continue to grow. So right now we're actively acquiring and growing just really so we can kind of feed our team the opportunities they want.
GM jobs, district manager jobs, corporate. Yeah. But you know what? That's not horrible too, because that will make it easier to do the software, right? And then so eventually you'll get 25, 30, 40 of these things. Some private equity guy or some other guy will come in and buy the whole portfolio from you and you'll have a beautiful payday, right?
Well, and I think, to your point, whenever I get asked, like, why are you in this? Why did you do this? Like, I was never passionate about franchising, but I come from my childhood. We were extremely poor. I kind of got home. I did like a church mission for the church I go to, and I got home and kind of quickly had this like reset of realizing I don't feel very confident that my parents are going to be able to retire themselves. Sure. I need to think ahead on this. And one thing led to another where it really became this, my momentum, my why, I guess you could say, was, wow, there's a lot of people in my same world and my same seat that would do anything to help their family or help the people around them find just a reason to be motivated to go kind of grow out of their comfort or their norm. And seeing this franchise endeavor and like what it's kind of done for some of our team, the regional managers, the district managers, now they are seeing that they are more than just, working this kind of like dead end job and not expecting themselves to kind of grow and to aspire and stretch themselves. And that has been ironically more than the money that's brought us or anything. That is what we have the most fun talking about is how do we help Mikey, see the value that we have, in him and his role and what he's done for us. And that ultimately comes back to us being more aggressive and growing the portfolio. Yeah.
And, what you just touched on, I think, is so many people want to get out of the day-to-day operations because they are hard and they're long hours and you're gone on nights and weekends and holidays and, a lot of that kind of stuff that burns out restaurant managers, I remember I went to hotel restaurant school in 1992. And the first time they're like, restaurants are really making a real considered effort to get like managers down to like 60 hours a week, It's like, you just burn out all your people and stuff. But one of the ways that you can keep yourself motivated and keep yourself in operations where you can add real value and make a lot of money is in developing talent. Like you have to find something beyond just the Groundhog Day part of running a restaurant, opening it up every day, making the cookies, shutting it down. Like that can get very monotonous over time.
Yes.
When you can focus. So I find that there's two routes you can take. If you're a super wonky numbered person, then you can really focus on how can I get a quarter of a point of labor down, or how can I get my food cost out? And and they start trying to tinker with, okay, if we use the knife and we do that, we just saved it 3 tablespoons of flour. Well, guess what? Like over the year, that'll be worth 10 bags of flour, stuff like that. Or you go the other route, which I had a great mentor who was a chef. His name's Keith Jones. And he was brought out of the ghetto by a chef. And then he became a chef and just loved teaching and developing people and helping them change their lives. Because restaurant management, for all its good and bad, is still one of those businesses that you can go out and do. You don't need a college degree. And if you do it well, you can make a fortune and you can have an amazing career and live all over the world and have a wonderful time, right? So getting people into this business and getting them hooked in and getting them to see the light of this whole thing is huge,
Well, this is somebody that hopefully he's okay with me name dropping him, but he's a large multi-unit franchisee. His name's John Gauthier, and he's owned Jimmy John's, Little Caesars, Crumbls. He's kind of owned a slew of brands, but he's who ultimately was the first person that really inspired me to do everything you just said. Is I cold called him on a whim because I knew he was like kind of like the go-to best practice franchisee with Crumbl. And then I asked him, like, where are you from? Is there any chance could I like fly out to see your stores and just kind of learn from you? And he just kind of on a whim said, he doesn't know who I am. He's like, yeah, if you'll fly out here and you're serious, then I'll show you I'll show you the keys to the kingdom.
Sure.
And that was like 4.5 years ago. And he has no monetary gain for checking in to see how I'm doing or how my business partner's doing. And we hear from him all the time. And he's calling us and coaching us and telling us how to, like what levers we should be pulling on. What you said at the very beginning of the episode, when the brand started seeing a downturn, he's on the phone with me and my business partner saying that do not sell, double down, get ready to grow your portfolio. And it meant so much to me because, it's I didn't pay him. I didn't hire him. I flew out and I stayed in a hotel for 3 days in his hometown. And he really did show us the keys to the kingdom. And so seeing how much fulfillment he gets out of that this late, he's had 50, 60 units under his belt forever and growing. And yet it's the early success of 2 new guys that, is kind of what's getting him out of bed and what he's excited about, and wanting to do the same thing now for the people that bet on us and wanting to come learn from us. I think that's the real golden nugget when all is said and done. Or so that's what it seems to be.
Yeah, because, the restaurant industry, like, it doesn't attract college graduates, but it doesn't attract MBAs from Harvard, right? It doesn't attract those guys. It attracts normal people who don't want to sit at a desk and they don't really want to be a plumber or work in construction. They have to talk to people, right? And they appreciate food and they appreciate the flexibility of a restaurant job. And, hey, I can come in Tuesday morning and Thursday night. I don't have to be there 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And so those people, like, there's a certain group of people who want to deliver and who are like kind and want to deliver good service and want to, and working with food is wonderful too. And like, and so those people need a career path, but the restaurant industry is generally one of those ones where, unless you're with a big corporation, you're not going to have that career path. And so you end up jumping around, but like when you can, it's such a mentor mentee thing, it's an apprenticeship thing. And it's such a cool business. I love the restaurant industry. Like that picture behind my head, you can't really see it, is like my grandfather's, the menu of my grandfather's restaurant that was on like Wall Street.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Trying to go, there you go, right there. That's the cover of his menu. He had, and my other grandfather, because I had 2 immigrant, I'm like Puerto Rican and Greek, right? So they all owned restaurants. And then my parents were like rocket scientists and like computer people. And then I went back into restaurants. And, but like, it's also like a generational thing too, right? Like it's in my blood. And so like, I love the restaurant industry, but then also now that I'm on the software side of it and on the operations side of it, I also I get so angry when I see restaurants screwing up, because my biggest frustration with all restaurants right now is that nobody seems to want to be an operator. They just want to own a restaurant and have it print money. And every time they mess something up that I know that they can control and it's part of their job, it just drives me insane. Especially to-go orders that are missing food. You get home and you're like, where you get your Torchy's tacos, and then you're all excited, and then there's no queso, and you just want to but the whole meal's there. It's going to take 45 minutes to get the queso. You're just like, that literally, I lose my mind. I veins pop out of my head. So, all right. You kind of told a war story already. So if you want to use your construction story for your war story, that's great. But if you got another one, I'll take it.
Maybe that's probably the best war story. Maybe one that's a little funny or ironic is something else that is a common. Maybe it's a rule of thumb. I'd call it a myth in my experience. Is you never do business with family.
Oh yeah, dude, you're totally right. Don't do it.
So, and here's what I'll push back on this: is I work with family across really. So I think we have probably 6 or 7 in our team is family. Now the caveat, it has made decision making a lot harder, because there's the care of this person, you wanting to really deliver for that person, but that also pulls the best out of you, right? And so it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's the people you can trust the most, but it also requires you to do the due diligence. I mean, so we had family involved in that venture, and the $400,000 that was lost, there was a family member that was operating the stores, or that was, an operator, or would be. And that's really hard. That's a really hard predicament to put somebody in. And that's the downside. The upside is that you get through those hard times, and who else do you want to win with than the people that are, closest to you?
Yeah. My experience has been with that is that you think you're doing something great for a family member or a friend, and they just go, well, that Tommy's just my boss. And so if they quit unexpectedly, they treat you like any other boss. Like they're working like part-time at 7-Eleven and they just quit. And you're like,
what are you doing? Yeah.
you know what alerts you just put me in. Now, having said that, one of the things that I didn't do that I would do now if I was going to hire family is I would have sat down and had a conversation with the person and said, look, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, I'm your boss. You're my employee. You work here. And, I'm going to treat you like any other employee. And on the weekends, we can have a beer and hang out and let our kids run around with each other. I never took the time. I just thought it was like all these things that you think you're a business. You can't turn somebody who's not a business owner or an entrepreneur into a business owner or an entrepreneur. It's impossible. They don't have the personality type for it. So because of that, you have to over explain stuff that you just assume that they know because you assume they're like you, and they're not. So if I did it again, I would sit down with whoever that person was and I would set clear expectations. Like, actually, I do have somebody who's working for me who's a friend from college. And I told them, like, okay, I'll hire you to do this, but we're gonna have this professional relationship. But I also told him, like, look, if you ever want to quit, you have to give me a 3 months notice, like minimum, because I can't, because we're a very small company, I can't just replace you overnight, right? So you know what I mean? So it's kind of one of those deals too. I kind of set that expectation with that guy, but definitely when I was younger, I didn't set those expectations and it came back to bite me in the ass.
No, and I with that, I didn't give context that I definitely made those same mistakes, and you really kind of have to work back through, and you almost have to forecast for them. This is what this opportunity could be for you. Do you want it? And okay, if you want it, then here's the parameters. Like, I need you to play this role. And so we've definitely had some learning curves, but at the end of the day, what's been the funnest is, the who that you get to win with if you pull it off.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is I just assumed that those guys were on for the same win that I was looking for, and they weren't, They were looking for a job. And so, you don't want to surround yourself with people who are just looking for a job. Like, I always say this too, like, anytime you go into a restaurant and it's dead and it's dirty and it's gross, and anybody who wants to work in this restaurant is someone you 100% don't ever want to be your employee, because they, you know what I mean? Like, they don't care about your business. Like, anybody because working in restaurants when they're slow is the worst job ever, because it's so boring, especially if you're on tips. Oh man, the worst. So anybody who's okay with that, being bored all day, is not someone you want to be an employee of yours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Man, this has been a great conversation, Taylor. I've had the best time. Do you want to throw out some URLs there for your software and say where your Crumbls are and tell people to go visit them, I guess?
Yeah, no, thank you for your time, Tommy. And it's been a great conversation for me as well. If anybody's interested in learning more about what we're building, it's www.coverpanda, just the 2 words put together, coverpanda.co. That will have the URL for the franchisor product offering and the services that we offer to franchisees. And then if you're interested in following along on LinkedIn, it's just Taylor Byington on LinkedIn.
Cool. Awesome, Taylor. Thank you guys for coming on the show today. And everybody, a huge announcement coming up for Empire Builders here in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that, and we'll have more interviews soon. Take care, everyone. Thanks, Taylor.
Hey, thanks so much. Thank you.